Hello everybody, this is ManuS, and spoiler season is upon us, so it's time to tackle the first new cards from the new region Targon, and how the whole release schedule is gonna work and so on. But before we get into that, you know the drill. I looked at my stats, 70% of you watching are not subscribed yet, so please help support the channel by changing that down below. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notification icon to not miss out on future content, and let me briefly introduce you to today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, one of the leading virtual private network providers out there. A virtual private network keeps your data secure and yourself anonymous while using the internet. NordVPN comes with super fast servers, allows you to unlock your favorite entertainment websites like Netflix. They provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. They also have an included cybersecurity suite, which acts as an ad blocker to boot. They don't lock any of your data, provide a 24/7 customer support, and you can use it on up to 6 simultaneous connections, so one account covers most or all of your electronic devices. And most importantly, they don't have any bandwidth limit, so you can use it non-stop without it getting throttled, which is particularly important for heavy users like us. It also won multiple awards and comes highly recommended by top technology experts. So if you're still surfing online without a VPN, now is the time to change that. Get NordVPN now, 70% off for a 3-year plan, including 1 month extra for free using the code ManuS or the personalized link in the description down below. And now on to today's content. All right, so first I want to take a look with you at this. This is the release schedule, so it works a bit different than at least I thought it would. Not sure about you, but I'll briefly dive into it. So what I thought is we will still get a full sort of set every 6 months, the same way we got with the Bilgewater set with Rising Tides. But Call of the Mountain will not be released all at once. The whole content every 2 months that they promised us will simply be Rising Tides split over 6 months rather than all released at once. So instead of getting all the 13 new champions and 150-ish, 160-ish cards in August, we only get basically the first half of the set. 7 champions, 82 non-champion cards. We don't know how they're going to distribute it. 7 champions means we can't get 1 champion for each region. So we probably get multiple Targon champions and some champions of the other regions, which is also a bit awkward because that means some regions will be getting new content before others, making them sort of overrepresented potentially in the metagame and stuff, and kind of has some tension with them trying to make all regions sort of similarly attractive and similarly played if possible. So that's a bit weird. And then 2 months later, we get the third quarter of the cards, 3 more champions, so these 7 non-champion cards. And then 2 months later, in December, we get the rest of the set. So not sure how to feel about this, honestly. Not super happy with this. I was thinking we would still get full sort of complete sets, because I liked how Rising Tides was released and impacted things. I thought it was a good size and everything. And then get some minor content every 2 months after, sort of just maybe not even champions, just a couple of new cards every 2 months to keep things a bit fresh, sort of like promos in Eternal, for example, stuff like that. That's what I was thinking would happen, but instead they just basically stretch out the release of a set over half a year, which is kind of weird and sort of creates this imbalance where certain regions have new tools and others don't. So not the biggest fan of that. I would have preferred them to just give us the whole Call of the Mountain set and then maybe give us a couple of non-champion cards 2 months later, just to further inject some cards into the pool rather than doing it this way. I don't know, what did you think? What did you expect? How do you feel about this? I wasn't following this side of the game too much. I just knew they basically wanted to give us a set every 6 months and additional content every 2 months, and I don't think it was clear before, or at least I wasn't aware that it was clear before, that we only getting this, because currently we have 7 regions, so we get 1 champion for each of the existing regions, and then we get 6 champions for the new region. So to bring us up, I think, to 6 champions in each region. So since I'm pretty sure the first 7 champions won't be the 7 champions of the existing regions and 0 Targon champions, that sort of excludes this like balanced release, because then we would have like Targon cards without Targon champions, which doesn't really work. So I think we'll probably see at least 3 Targon champions in those 7, if I had to guess, to have a sort of diversity in Targon and options. Because we started with 4 champions in the other regions, so maybe we even get 4 Targon champions and 3 like non-Targon champions in the first 7, and then the other 6 champions will be the remaining Targon champions and the remaining regions. But yeah, once again, bit weird. Not sure how to feel about this. A bit disappointing to see this like uneven release. But I don't think this is going to change anytime soon, so I think we have to accept this as fact. But yeah, let me know in the comments how you feel about this, what you think, what you expected, and so on. I think this is kind of interesting and kind of impactful, and I was hoping and wishing that it would go down differently, but this is what it is. Also kind of nice to see that we have these clearer like champion and unit and spell symbols, because I think they are different from what we had before, or we didn't even have clear symbols before, at least I wasn't aware of them, and it's kind of nice to see this like sort of card type defining symbols. They're nice, and they're also helpful for like, I don't know, content creation stuff. Anyway, let's dive into the spoilers. First, we have the new mechanic. Sorry for the poor resolution. All we have is screenshots from the like sort of GIF or video. Please, Riot, give us proper cleaned up high resolution versions of the cards and keyword shield like thingy, as we got last spoiler season for content creation. That would be great, so we don't have to deal with these like low resolution, poorly cut out images and screenshots. Anyway, Spell Shield nullifies the next enemy spell or skill that would affect this unit. So this is kind of like Barrier in a sense. I think on units it will work similar to Barrier, although I'm not sure if it's going to be like Barrier, that you play a unit with Spell Shield and it has Spell Shield for that turn and then it disappears, or if the Spell Shield will persist until it is broken. That's the thing that is not clear. But I think there will be units that have Spell Shield, naturally, like there are units that have Barrier. And then the only thing we don't know yet is the Spell Shield like Barrier only the turn you play it, or is the Spell Shield permanent until it is used up? Then there are obviously also cards that can give Spell Shield, just like Barrier, that work the same way. We don't know if it's a permanent Spell Shield, or if the Spell Shield sort of fades away at the end of turn. But we'll get into that with the later spoiler. But the other thing is, it's not exactly clear how Spell Shield works. Nullifies the next enemy spell or skill that would affect this unit is a different wording from stuff we are used to. Like, for example, if you look at Fizz, Fizz stops the spell. So as soon as something targets him, he sort of counters, stops the spell. Which means the spell is completely countered and removed from the chain. So even if it has other targets, that doesn't matter. But it only works on stuff that targets Fizz, which is also not exactly clear in the wording here, if this works the same or not. Since the wording is different, so it might work differently, but it also might not, because their wording hasn't been the most clear and consistent. So this means this might only nullify the part that affects the unit. So for example, if you cast a Make It Rain, hit a unit with Spell Shield and 2 other targets, the unit with Spell Shield doesn't get affected, by the Make It Rain, the other 2 targets do. Or it works like Fizz, and the Make It Rain gets stopped. We don't know for sure. We also don't know if this affects any spell or skill that affects the unit, like for example, Judgment or Ruination. Because a Ruination still affects the unit, but it doesn't target the unit. What I can say is, at least if it applies to something like Ruination, we can rule out the fact that it counters the entire spell, because that would be like way too impactful, way too extreme. You basically couldn't Ruination on a board with a spell sheet unit. That makes no sense. So if this affects non-targeting effects, it works sort of like Aegis in Eternal, which means it only like blocks the effect on the unit with the spell shield. Honestly, I think that is the most likely case, that the spell shield just kind of protects the one unit from the effect. But that again contradicts with the wording here, because nullifies the next enemy spell isn't... Oh no, deny I think says negates, not nullifies. So actually I think this is most likely like this spell affecting part of Aegis in Eternal, which means it just makes it so the spell has no effect on the specific spell sheet unit, but resolves normally on everything else. So here's my bet. My bet right now is this just makes the unit immune to whatever effect the next spell has on it, enemy spell or skill, has on it, but doesn't affect the resolution of the spell or skill. So the spell or skill resolves, but doesn't have an effect on anything that has a spell shield, and affects the rest normal. So if you have a unit with a spell shield unit, and 2 other units, the opponent Ruinations, your spell shield unit survives, the rest dies. That is what I would think this works like. Sort of like a 1-turn Unyielding Spirit type effect in cases like that, which is pretty powerful. So given that we know how good Aegis is in Eternal, I would expect this to be similarly strong. So we'll see how it plays out, and we'll talk about this once we get to the relevant spoiler. On to the first unit, we have Tiari the Traveler. 2 cost 2/2, and on support, grant my supported ally +0/+2. Initially, I missed that this isn't just this round, so that certainly makes it better than it looks, but not sure how good this is going to be. 2/2 is kind of like the problematic stat line. Usually you want like a 3/2 or 2/3, so you either survive a decent amount of like 2/3s and 2/2s, or so that if you don't survive the 2/3s, you can trade with them. But basically just being colded by any 2/3 is problematic, since 2/3 is a very good and quite common 2-drop stat line, as well as a lot of like utility and throwaway 2/2s like House Spider, Deckhand and all that stuff, and trading with these is a bit rough. But to be fair, trading with a Deckhand while buffing another unit permanently is still a fine outcome. In that sense, it kind of compares a bit to something like Deckhand or House Spider, basically a 2/2 with an additional permanent effect. The big difference is you need to sort of throw away Tiari to get that effect, while with a Deckhand or House Spider you don't. And the other thing is, you might also risk throwing away the unit you're trying to enhance, because you have to get into combat with both units, and sometimes it's bad for both units to get in combat, so you don't get any value out of it at all. The thing that most clearly comes to mind here is obviously challenge. If you have a lot of challenge, this becomes much better. The challenges allow you to protect Tiari and sort of control combat more, and the additional health is really valuable on a challenger. Like Tracker into Tiari, pretty nice. Then you have a 2/3 Tracker that can pull the opponent's 2/3 or even 2/2 and protect Tiari, especially against a deck that doesn't have a 1-drop but plays their Deckhand or House Spider or whatnot on 2. Obviously the same goes for like Laurent, Protege and Fiora on 3, especially if you're attacking on odds. So there's a lot of potential with the Marcia here. Outside of like challenge, this doesn't seem very good. There are obviously ways like buffs and like sort of barrier to make this a bit better, protect this a bit more, but the barrier effects are usually too clunky and expensive to be worthwhile to use on this to protect this, so it's mostly down to small combat tricks and challenger. So this mostly seems worthwhile with Demacia, potentially. The problem is Demacia has very good 2-drops already that are more universal and have better overall stats and are in Demacia, and in Demacia you usually want to be Bannerman if you're unit heavy, so there's a lot of tension here. So it might be that this card is gonna be in a bit of a rough spot, but it's too early to say. We don't know a lot of cards, and there is a support theme going on in Targon, so there might be enough support to be a Targon heavy support deck, maybe even a Targon Allegiance support theme deck with a bit of a support splash from other regions. Most regions have 2 support units. Most units that have support units have 2 support units. Demacia actually is one of the regions that only has 1 support unit. So on that front, Demacia is actually less appealing in a support themed deck. But we'll see if that is a thing. We'll talk about it in a moment with the next spoiler. But yeah, anyway, this card could end up being a pretty decent 2-drop in the right context. It also plays well with Trifarian Glory Seeker, for example. But we'll have to wait and see. It depends a lot on context. 2/2 as a stat line for a 2-drop is certainly problematic, but there might be enough context in specific decks where that can be mitigated, and then getting +0, +2 permanently on a unit, and even maybe multiple times, is really, really powerful. So this is like a high ceiling, low floor sort of 2-drop that depends a lot on having the right context to be closer to its ceiling than to its floor. So yeah, we will need more information, but this is certainly a potentially constructed relevant card. Next we have Mountain Sojourners. This is a 5-cost 2/5 with support. In this case, it grants its supported ally +2/+2, once again permanently. So the permanent support thing seems to be a Targon theme, and here we have the Targon support synergy thing that I talked about. If that ally has support, also grant its supported ally +2/+2. So you sort of want to like have this sort of support chain. And yeah, there are regions that come to mind like Noxus that have a 2-drop and a 5-drop. Problem is then you suddenly have 2 5-drops, so that's a bit awkward. And there are some other regions like Demacia and Shadow Isles have 1 support unit. Bilgewater has 0, PNZ has 2, but they're both not that great. 2-cost 1/3 that gives Elusive, and a 3-cost 2/4 that shuffles copies into your deck. Both very like fringe and situational effects that don't really actually do that much. And then Ionia has Shen on 4, and the 2-cost 2/2 that gives lifesteal on 2, which is also not that great of a support unit. So the only region that has 2 appealing support units is Noxus right now, but there's a bit of a tension with too many 5s here potentially. Ionia has 2, but one of them is kind of weak and constructed, and the other one is a very specific like build around, forcing you into barriers. And then obviously Demacia has 1 really good one, and PNZ has 2 bad ones. So yeah, might in the end be dependent on just being maybe the Targon Allegiance deck with mostly Targon support, and then maybe splashing Demacia for Warchefs, or say Noxus for Drummer, or maybe even Drummer and Kato, and just playing 2 5-drops depending on the size of the deck and so on. But this is basically effectively like a 4/7 the turn you play it in a way, and as a 2/5 it's reasonably robust. The problem is still a bit that 2/5 on 5 often means that it gets eaten for free, since a lot of 5-drops in the game right now actually are 5 attacks, so that might be a strike against it, and the lack of like 1 additional health means it often buffs something and then deals 2 damage to the opposing 5-drop and dies in combat. So you need some additional help to keep this alive potentially. Or you need like 2 support units to buff 2 things, So this dying is fine, or you need enough challengers so they can protect it. Once again, this seems pretty powerful with enough challengers. And like I said, maybe there is like a Targon Demacia mid-range deck with challenge support theme type stuff, and maybe, I don't know, you swap Bright Steel Protector for the new Targon support 2-drop, and then you have two support 2-drops and more support cards, because we're probably gonna see more support cards. But yeah, once again, a card that is a bit better than the 2-drop, but all in all, I think depends a decent amount on context and what decks are going to look like. This is a bit more of a vacuum card than the 2-drop, but I think in the end, if this one is good and playable, chances are reasonably good that the 2-drop is going to see play and be playable and constructed as well. But there is a chance that this might just be good enough as a standalone card in some decks where the 2-drop might not be. But we'll have to see and wait for more context. Next, we have another payoff for the whole support theme. It's a 10 cost 6/6 Overwhelm. We've seen these cards before, the 10 cost 5/5 6/6s with some ability that get cheaper. We have the Plaza Guardian and we have the I think Scuttler, like the 10 cost 5/5 Fearsome and Shadow Isles. And yeah, this is the latest incarnation. The other two have never really cut it. Maybe this can be better because it's a bit more reliably supportable in the sense that it is a bit more of a free roll, because you reduce the cost by 1 for each time you've targeted or supported allies this game. So by playing a lot of support allies, you kind of naturally reduce the cost of this by a decent amount. And then there's also like two things. There's the support and there's the targeting. So in the right sort of deck, this could be a bit better than the other two 10 cost units I talked about, but it might in the end suffer from the same issues. Although 6/6 Overwhelm is probably better than a 5/5, notably better than the 5/5 Fearsome, and also probably a bit better than the Plaza Guardian, since quick attack is nice, but as a 6/6 you usually like beat everything in combat. Sure, damage is permanent, so quick attack still has merit, but the problem with Plaza Guardian still is there's often a lot of like semi-free jump block potential, while with Arbiter you're gonna take quite a lot of damage. So depends also on like what the deck is going to look like. In a Demacia Targon deck that is like heavy challengers and is kind of like a board control mid-range beatdown deck, Overwhelm has a lot less value than in a more aggressive deck that cares about pushing damage rather than just dominating the board. Say Targon Noxus, for example, could be a region combination where Overwhelm would have more merit than, say, Targon Demacia. Not to say that Overwhelm is bad in Demacia, it's just less relevant to deal damage to the opponent, because you usually care about taking the board first. Once you have control of the board, dealing damage and killing the opponent comes naturally because they're behind, and short of something like a Ruination or another big swing play, they usually can't get the board back. So yeah, Arbiter of the Peak looks cool at first, might in the end just not cut it like the other cards of this sort of cycle. But once again, too early to tell. Depends on what other cards we get and how Targon plays with other regions and where it fits in best. And last but not least for this batch of spoilers, we have Bastion. This is sort of the new prismatic barrier type thing. It's a 3-cost burst spell, and it gives an ally spell shield this round. The fact that this says this round might mean that spell shield in general doesn't work like barrier and is permanent otherwise, and here specified as this round. I would need to double check prismatic barrier if it also says this round. I'm not entirely sure, honestly. I'm opening up the client in the background while talking about this. Anyway, so this is pretty nice. First of all, under the assumption that something like Ruination is affected by Spell Shield in the sense that the unit survives Ruination, but Ruination still resolves. This means it lets you save individual units from Ruination while also saving individual units from all kinds of effects, from stuns, from bounces, from stuff you normally can't protect your units well. Making this a really good way of counterplaying the sort of finishing stoppers. There are decks like Karma Ezreal that depend a lot on recall and stun effects to sort of prolong the game to a point where they are stable enough to turn on you and win before you can push through all their defenses. And often they don't have redundant mana to stun a unit multiple times, or have redundant effects to do this. So there often are situations where you threaten lethal and they barely have enough mana and enough effects to stave off lethal. And then if you have a Bastion in one of those cases on one of the effects, that usually means their defenses crumble, fall in on it themselves, and they die. So Bastion is going to be a pretty big deal on that front, for example. By the way, I'm quickly just checking the prismatic barrier type situation. Prismatic barrier. Yeah, never mind barrier. Prismatic barrier also says this round, so this doesn't tell us anything about spell shield functioning like barrier or not. Is it permanent until it gets used up like Aegis in Eternal, or is it gonna go away at the end of turn anyway, just like barrier does? If so, it would be a lot weaker on units, because actually barrier is much more likely to matter than spell shield for a single turn, because with barrier means you get one free combat, you get one free block or one free attack, and the opponent needs to jump block or needs to lose one of their best units into your barrier units if they want to attack in a tour board with barrier. While spell shield doesn't do that. That only means the opponent can't remove the unit this turn and has to wait till the next, which most of the time doesn't really matter that much. Sure, they can't use tricks on it, like freeze and stuff, so that can matter. And so I guess giving spell shield to certain key units and like combo-ish pieces where you want to stick a unit, then get to your next turn and use mana with that unit in play, spell shield can be useful and can be more reliable than barrier, but that seems underwhelming as an effect for units that come with spell shield naturally. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But as an effect, like Bastion, I think spell shield is actually pretty nice, and with the way I assume this works, I think this card's going to be pretty good. Might not be a 3-off, because some decks have very few or even none things that are really affecting Bastion much, so it might not be a 3-off, but I think it's very reasonably like a 2-off in a lot of or most Targon decks, since it's pretty versatile. You can even use it against like freezes by preemptively using it. Like, for example, you have a potentially lethal attack and you want to not get blown out by a harsh wind or something. You just Bastion your unit, declare your attack, and then the opponent can't freeze the unit because they need 2 freeze effects to pop the spell shield and then freeze the unit. You can't use it reactively, obviously, against burst spells, but this proactive use against predicted burst spells is pretty strong and something that, for example, Deny couldn't do, which is pretty great. So it sort of serves the purpose of a hybridization of Deny and Barrier. It has certain up and downsides of both effects. Like, it can't stop certain spells that Deny can stop, but it also can protect you from preemptively from burst spells, which Deny can't. And in terms of Barrier, it can stop damage spells, just like Barrier can, but it can't help you in combat. It can only help you against non-combat damage. Basically skill, or rather like non-combat skill damage and spell damage and stuff like that. So there are like some mixed benefits and downsides of Barrier and Deny mixed into one to create a new effect, which is pretty cool because it creates additional dynamics of what is good and bad against certain decks and regions, like things you will have to evaluate things differently against Targon because of Bastion, the same way that in a different way than against barrier decks, and in a different way against Ionia decks when playing around Deny, because they all do different things. So in a metagame where all these effects exist, it means you need to like build your deck with all these different effects in mind and how it plays again, how differently it plays against these effects and stuff. But yeah, I think Bastion's pretty cool, pretty strong card. Quite flexible all in all, I think. Especially under the assumption that it still makes your unit survive stuff like Judgment and Ruination and so on. And the interesting like preemptive uses against stuff like Freeze is pretty nice. So yeah, pretty cool card. One of the more impactful cards, if I had to guess, from this set, simply because it's a 3-cost burst spell that can stop a lot of stuff. It also has the same weakness of Barrier in the sense that if they use a spell, you Bastion, and they use another spell, you can't really spell shield again to stop it the same way you can't double Barrier. So that's another thing that it has in common with Barrier because of its burst nature. Also the fact that it costs 3 and therefore works with spell mana is pretty huge and allows you to consistently have sort of shield up to protect a specific unit from interaction from the opponent, which is also really strong. And that's also something that neither Deny nor Barrier can do in the same sense. The only thing that sort of does it in a similar way is Unyielding Spirit, but that costs 8 and isn't burst anymore. And even Unyielding Spirit can't protect you from a lot of things interacting with units. It just makes your unit really resilient. While Bastion allows you to basically make sure that your opponent has a really hard time and needs redundant effects to take care of your unit. So Targon is going to be sort of the protect my unit, protect my individual threat region particularly well. Meaning this might be, say, the new Fiora region. We might have like a Targon, Demacia, Challenger, or Fiora deck, because Bastion really good at protecting your Fiora. The Demacia part makes it so Fiora is good in combat and can repeatedly challenge stuff, and the Targon region makes sure that your opponent doesn't interfere with it in a way where you before couldn't. Like some of the stuff you could when you were playing it with Ionia before Deny got nerfed, but since Deny costed 4, that was much less viable. Also, it still wouldn't help against Burst, and it would still be narrow because Deny is in a way narrower than Bastion. So suddenly you have 3 burst spell effects that protect your Fiora outside of combat, and then like your Demacia stuff to protect her inside of combat, and Targon support stuff like the 2-drop to further make her like super strong. Like the 2-drop into Fiora seems pretty good. So I can totally see one of the like first things to try with Targon, with these new Targon cards, is a Fiora deck, and seeing if it finally is good again, because most of the Fiora variants, like more dedicated Fiora decks, have not been very good, but maybe this time it will be. We don't know. It certainly seems like a good foundation to start from. And yeah, pretty excited for Bastion. Pretty cool card. I could imagine this card turning out a bit too strong down the line, and they maybe need to adjust it a bit, but could also be that it's very like reasonably costed. It's not clearly too good, I think, but it has the potential to, in the end, turn out a bit too efficient to always have a shield up and basically, just say no to whatever first effect the opponent tries to use on a unit, and making them have 2 effects. We know that from Eternal how much of a problem the need to target your unit twice thing can be, especially for a lot of regions that only have like 1 card that sort of can take care of opposing units, and they often have like 1 playset, so it's like 3 copies in the entire deck, and then against a deck with 2 or 3 bastions, like you basically, your whatever unit you need to survive is basically unkillable. Like say, I don't know if that's gonna be a thing that's supported. Imagine like a Twisted Fate Targon deck. Twisted Fate, super obnoxious, needs to be killed. If he ever levels, the game is over for most decks. Suddenly, all these decks that have like 3 single combats or 3 mystic shots or 3 whatever as the only way to deal with Twisted Fate, and you are the Targon Twisted Fate guy. You just leave 3 mana open if you can afford to, Twisted Fate Bastion, and the deck basically cannot kill your Twisted Fate anymore, realistically. And stuff like that could become a bit obnoxious and problematic under the right circumstances. But yeah, too early to tell, something to keep an eye out on, and I think a pretty easy like 2-off in most unit-heavier Targon decks, and probably a 3-off in some of the more dedicated decks, especially that care about protecting specific threats. Especially given that it's not just spells, it's also skills, and some decks might not have that many spells, but they sometimes still come with some skills. Noteworthy here though is, like a lot of things, it doesn't do a whole lot against Riptide Rex, because it will only block 1 of the 7 shots from Riptide Rex. So another card on the long list of, well, this doesn't do anything against Rex. Welcome to the Rex world. Alright, enough talk. This is my take on the first spoilers. Pretty cool new cards. Looking forward to more spoilers. Curious to see how the new spoilers turn out. What cards we're gonna get in the first sort of half of the set, and which ones we don't. That's it again for this time. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. Let me know in the comments what you think about these spoilers, about my assessment of them, and of course, what you would like me to touch in the future. Any constructive feedback is welcome, and if you enjoyed the content, hit the like button, subscribe for more, turn on the notifications, share with your friends, and yeah, that's it again for this time. I'm your host ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.